Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at Camp Sunshine by Heather S. Chauvin, and I actually enjoyed this one. I wasn't sure at first because so it's been sitting on the shelf just mocking me because I was gonna save it until October because it was a scary story. The synopsis says, 3 couples, 2 kids, and 1 camping trip gone horribly wrong. Who is responsible for the murder at Pleasant Valley Campground that night? Trapped not only in her mind, but also in a forensic mental health facility, Brooke struggles with that question. In this novella, an imprisoned woman recollects the past while struggling with her present. After years of silence, brutal mental turmoil, and behavioral outbursts, Brooke's situation changes. As the lines between her memory and reality blur, she must go back to relive the terror. Her disheveled appearance did nothing to convince the authorities that she was innocent, and her mental trauma and inability to defend herself shine an unforgiving light on what really happened. After all this time, she will never be able to prove what happened. Will she be ever able to prove what happened? And if she does, can she accept the truth? So obviously a thriller. And so it felt like a perfect October book, but it's been sitting on a shelf and it's just been like, you know how books sometimes, if you're an avid reader, sometimes a book will just like start whispering at you like, hey, read me. And so I got tired of listening to it and I was like, I'm not sure I'm gonna be as into it here in August as I would be in, say, October. So I was just like, you know what, I don't know that I'm in a thriller mood, but I know I'm not in a fantasy mood. I've read so many fantasy novels that I'm kind of fantasied out, but I do have more fantasy novels on the TBR that need to be read, and I want to read them, but I thought, you know what, maybe a thriller, I don't know if a thriller is really the break from fantasy that I need, but maybe. And I actually really enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. I still think I would have enjoyed it in October, spooky season and whatnot. But it's a good summer read too. So I don't do a whole lot of camping, and this is why, you know. So Brooke and her husband Kent are invited to go camping with Julie and her husband Jacob. And Brooke and Kent have a toddler. Her name is Erin, and then Bruce and Jacob and Julie have one daughter, Rachel, and a child on the way. And then there's a third couple, Yasmin and Bruce, and the two of them end up getting invited along with this camping trip too. So you have Yasmin, her husband Bruce, who have no children, Kent and Brooke and their daughter Erin, and Julie and Jacob and their daughter Rachel, all sharing a camper together. And the girls, there really is a separation between the men and the women, because the men are constantly running off and the girls are constantly running off, and they spend very little time actually together. Most of the time that they do spend together is sitting around the fire or playing cards. And there's a graveyard that they find at this campground, and it's really interesting how everything kind of ties together. And I won't go into how everything ties together. Like, there's a reason the graveyard is where it is, and when the women are exploring the graveyard, they notice that it's like, okay, here's a graveyard, and there's the campgrounds, and there's a football field. Like, what a weird place to put a graveyard, you know? And so they start looking at the dates on the graveyard, and most of them are like from the 1920s and the 1930s and 1940s. They're like really old. But there is one new gravestone, a brand new tombstone. They're like, it's interesting that we have all these old graves and then we have a new tombstone, and that was interesting for them. They thought that was really interesting, and so they're hanging out in the graveyard, and at one point, they've got the two little girls with them, and at one point, Aaron ends up falling into the toddler falls into like a shallow, like 3-foot deep hole, and of course, Mommy Brooke comes and gets her out of the hole, and her first, as they're looking at this hole, they're all like, did she just fall into an open grave? And they're like, it can't be an open grave because it's not perfectly rectangular. There's rounded corners, not sharp corners, and it's only 3 feet deep. Most graves are like 6 feet deep. So, like, probably not a grave, probably just a really big hole that she just happened to fall into. Because along with the campground and the football field, there's also like animals, so you never know what's, you know, digging around. But the story starts off slow, which I kind of appreciate. Bless me. But I appreciate the slow build to it because you already know you're getting a thriller. You know what's going to happen. And the author takes her time with letting you get to really know the characters and getting to know the layout of the campground. And, excuse me. What I like about that is because you get to know a bit more about the campground and you get to know more about the characters, you kind of have a connection, and you're like, as you're going through this, you know, because the story is being told there's dual point of views here. Oh, there's a third point of view, but for the most part, it's being told from Brooke's point of view, and it keeps time jumping. It jumps from back then when they were camping to now when Brooke is in the mental facility trying to piece together things that have happened. And at first, she's kind of just going through the motions. She's just surviving. She's just existing, really. She's not even surviving. She's just eat, sleep, drink, use the pot, go to bed, take your medicines, you know. She gets to a point where she stops talking. She won't talk to anybody. And then, and the reason she's in the mental facility is because when she was in the woods, it was just her and Julie in the woods. And then Julie is the one that ends up getting killed. But, and they let you know that pretty soon that Julie was the one that got killed. But the two of them are by themselves, just driving around, trying to get some fresh air for the night, and they're just on a night drive when Julie is, and they're just going out, and you know, and they stop and are like looking at the stars when Julie gets killed, and Brooke sees everything happen, and she notices everything happening, and then she manages to escape and runs back to the camper, and she is completely incoherent. Everybody is just like, what is going on? What happened? And for whatever reason, I don't know what was going on in her mind. Like, I know what was going on in her mind, but it didn't make any sense for her to just, like, pick up the knife that killed Julie and run back to the campgrounds back to the camper. She's covered in blood. She's covered in dirt. She's got the knife. So everybody is like, why would you kill your best friend? And then they're like, and she's going back and forth because on one hand, she's like, no, I didn't kill her, but she's dead and I'm the reason she's dead. It's my fault she's dead. And they're like, what are you talking about? You know? So they eventually, they don't do a very good thorough investigation. They're just like, okay, we have a person that's dead, we have a person that's not dead, we have the person that's not dead has the knife and is covered with the victim's blood. Let's just wrap it up and call this one the killer. You know, they've got enough evidence that they can say this one is probably the killer. And so she's not really able to stand trial. She's not mentally capable of standing trial as much as such that she can be put in jail, and more to be, it's like, okay, well, she probably killed her best friend, she's mentally unstable, let's put her in the mental facility and she'll just stay there. And she goes to this day program, and the day program is actually my favorite part of the story because she meets Grace / Susan / Rebecca. And I love this character, and I wish we could have gotten more time with her. But when she goes to the day program for the first time, she spent several years just being kind of isolated. And finally they're like, okay, let's try her in the Camp Sunshine program. And that's where she's at, is Camp Sunshine, which is the mental facility. And so they take her to the, they take her to Camp Sunshine and to the day program. And she sees a woman and she's like, oh, I think her name is Susan. And the woman comes up to her and says, hi, my name is Grace, I'm going to be your tour guide today. And she's like, okay, you got that name wrong. And so they go in and she's like, okay, so first we're going to do crafts, but it's always the simple crafts because they don't trust us with the scissors because we're all nuts here. Then we go into a group circle where we can all talk about our crap. Then we have lunch. Then we can go and have a kumbaya moment. And then we get to watch TV until it's our time to talk to the big dog, which is the head shrinker. And she's like, okay. And like Brooks, like I said, she stops talking at some point in her mental incarceration. And Grace, so she never answers Grace at all. And Grace is like, wow, you don't talk a whole lot. That's okay. I can talk for the both of us. And so they go in and they do their craft, and this is where Brooke starts to really wake up and start to come to herself. And then they go to the circle, and they're supposed to line their chairs around in a circle around the poofy-haired woman who is directing everything. And Grace refuses to put her chair facing the center of the circle. She faces it away from the circle. And the woman's like, Susan, turn your chair around. You know what I meant. And so Grace turns her chair around. And she's like, okay, Susan, why don't we start with you? You got something to share? And Susan's like, I don't even know why I'm here. There's no point in me sharing anything. I'm not crazy. And it's like, oh, okay. And Brooke is just like, wait, is her name actually Susan, or is it Grace, or was she just messing with me when she said it was Grace? And so she kind of smiles over at Grace / Susan, and Susan's like, what are you smiling at, weirdo? And she's like, okay. And then they're like, hey, Brooke, how about you? You want to share anything? And Brooke, again, doesn't speak. So she's just like, does the only thing she knows to do in this situation when people want her to speak and she doesn't want to speak. She screams. And they're like, okay, that's fine. You don't have to share the first time. We'll move on. And so they do move on. And then they go to lunchtime. And they set the trays out and everything. And she watches where Susan/Grace is sitting and sits next to her because she's like, this is an interesting person. And so Grace/Susan sits next to her and says, oh, hi, I'm Rebecca. It's a pleasure to meet your acquaintance. And she's like, okay, you definitely belong here. And it's the first time that she actually starts using her words with Brooke. Brooke starts using her words and she's like, hey, so have you ever met Grace? No, never met Grace. Susan's kind of a witch, right? And she's like, And she's like, how many personalities do you have? And she's like, I get asked that a lot. I guess that's why we're here, huh? Because we're all nuts. And it's like, you are, you know? But yeah, I wish we could have gotten more time with that character. She does say that Rebecca is her least favorite of the personalities. But I like up to that point I was enjoying what was going on in the mental institution more than I was at the camp. But after that, that's when the things at the camp really start to pick up, and the things, the story really picks up, because like I said, the first couple of chapters with the camp, you're just getting to know the characters, you're getting to know the camp layout, and you're getting to know the key players. The story gets told from 3 different point of views. The first point of view and the most common point of view is Brooke's. The second most common point of view is CJ. CJ is a 17-year-old kid who is out on a father-son bonding camping trip with his dad. And him and his dad, like, don't really... They're like, butting heads. And they have that typical, you don't get me, Dad, and the dad's like, I'm trying to, you know, situation. And you see it mostly from CJ's point of view of like, yeah, my dad doesn't get me, I'm a big disappointment to him, I'm a failure to him, he doesn't like me, he doesn't care about me, he wants to get rid of me, type thing. And his dad is just like trying to piece together everything that he's doing, and how, like, who is my son, because he and his wife are divorced, and so his son only is with him only some of the times, and so he has less of a chance to really get to know his son because he's not with his son all the time. So you get Brooke's point of view of what happens, and then you get CJ's point of view and everything that he sees and notices. And he sees a lot more than what Brooke does, and like some of the things that he is able to shed onto the case, she's like, I'm surprised by that information, but not surprised by that information, you know? It's one of those like, oh, is that, okay, you know? But then at the end, when you get the wrap-up of the story, where you get the conclusion, it doesn't come from either Brooke or CJ's point of view. It comes from Brooke's therapist, when he's able to kind of put together everything. He's like, okay, this is basically his case study of Brooke. And then when Brooke is, what I love about the story is that when Brooke is finally able to get her mind stable, It's not a, okay, well, I'm all better and everything goes back to normal and I can tell you everything that happened. I can tell you exactly how it happened and yada, 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 and like everything's fine. And it's not fine. Brooke realizes that it doesn't matter how much better I'm doing mentally. And like I can be healed or treated, or whatever the phrase you want to use, but I am never going to be able to go back to the person I was before the murder. And as a result, you know, I can't even fathom having that life, the being the person I was or having the life I had. I can't go back to that. Everything has changed and I have to deal with that change. And she mentions the, how does she say it, building blocks. Oh, come on. Yeah, she says, I need to take out, I will have to tear away all the ugly ruined bits. I'll start over again at the studs. I'll build myself back into the woman that I used to be. But even then, and that's not even the end of the story, it goes on further from that, and even when she gets to that point where she has started to, you know, she's taken herself down to the studs and started to rebuild, she's realizing that I will never be the woman I used to be, but I can be a better version of who I am. And I can be, I have to be this and this. I can't just be the optimistic, everything's going to be okay, and there's nothing but good in the world. She now sees the ugliness and the terror in the world and the evil in the world, and she has to live with that. And she knows she has to live with that, and it's not this happily ever after the way you want it to be. You know, where, you know, she's like, okay, I'm gonna go be my husband's wife, be my daughter's mother, and we're gonna be a family again, and everything's gonna be great. She knows that she can't just jump back into that life. And she has to, as the back of the book says, before she can even start rebuilding, she has to first embrace the truth of what happened that night and accept her part of those events. And she starts to work through that, and it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't end with this big happily ever after. It's a very realistic of, okay, we've been through some stuff. We're going to rebuild from that stuff. And what we get is not going to be what we used to have, but it's going to be a version of what we used to have combined with what we have now. And I love that about this story. As usual, I'm going to leave the description, the link to the book in the description below. It is a good, this is a good anytime read. You can read it summer, winter, fall. It was the perfect palate cleanser that I needed to step away from all the romance and the fantasy and whatnot. I really enjoyed having the palate cleanser that this book was, and I think that anybody who enjoys thriller or horror is really going to enjoy the development of the characters. So don't forget to like, subscribe, share, do all the things, and I will see you guys in the next one when we start on our September reading adventure. So like I said, links in the description below. Catch you guys later. Bye.